SMGs can be insanely powerful at close range in Escape from Tarkov, and some of them worked out way better than even I expected before testing them out. So today we're looking at Tarkov's 5 best SMGs overall, starting with the P90. So this is a default P90 from the flea market or from the trader, whichever you prefer. This is just how it comes, and I will say that I did probably struggle a little bit more with the P90 than the others, but it's still very, very good, and I think the reasons for this will become clear as we go through the weapon. To start with, it's very cheap at the moment, and it is 900 RPM, which is nice and fast, which is what you want from an SMG because typically the ammo selection is a little bit less powerful than that which you get on assault rifles, so we're going to go and have a look at that on the magazine first. We have a combination of different bullets that are available, and typically the one that is used with the P90 is SS190, which you can get straight off the trader, which is a nice bonus, and it only costs $3.67 per bullet. It's slightly less than the 4 listed here because this doesn't show you any fractional places with the dollar costs. If you're not there, you can also buy it from the flea market, and it's not that much inflated really. This is probably about 600 rubles or so it's only a little bit more markup for getting SS190. Now, the thing about SS190 is that it is okay. It is 49 damage and 37 pen, which is, I would say, like just about okay, and this is what makes it more of a headshot ammo than anything else. 37 penetration is fine if you're fighting against class 4 armor, but if you come up against anybody who is wearing class 5 armor, or heaven forbid 6, you're going to really struggle to kill them with chest shots. A lot of bullets that you need to hit them with in order to actually win. So you really do want to be aiming for the head with these guns. And I think what does make this slightly problematic with the P90 is the vertical recoil on it is a little bit higher than on some of the other SMGs, which you can see when you go and test it out. SS190 is another one of those bullets that does unfortunately suffer from the it won't actually kill through a class 4 helmet with one shot because the pen and damage combination is just very slightly too low, as I showed in this other video the other day. But as we saw, the fire rate is pretty adequate and decent, so you should be able to either get a shot onto the face somewhere that's unprotected, or at least just hit them twice if you're relatively close. So yes, there are some downsides, but what are the good sides about the P90? Well, you have the 50 rounders, which is something that some weapons do really struggle with. 50 rounders by default. There is not another magazine that you can use for the P90, so you're forced to use 50s, which is very adequate for an SMG, very nice at this RPM. But we do have to note that you really don't want to be repacking this thing in raid. There is a hefty modifier on the 50s for the P90 because I think IRL they are quite fiddly to repack, and it is extremely slow to repack these in raid. So you want to be bringing all of the ammo that you're going to be shooting kind of with you, and the spare ammo that's in your secure container is really there as a backup because you're going to be waiting for a long time if you're trying to repack a full 50 rounder in raid itself. There are 2 ways that you can build the gun as well. This is the standard one with the standard barrel, which you can see has a fairly bad MOA. Not that that really matters for SMGs. 4.13 is not great, but you can also pick a different barrel instead. There is a 16-inch barrel that changes the MOA to 1.19, which is actually really good and rivals some of the DMRs in the game. And this also increases the muzzle velocity as well, making it much easier to hit targets over longer distances. There used to be this great barter for the P90, which got you the long barrel version and this top rail as well for 2 military cables, and this used to be really good, about 60,000 rubles, but then something happened to military cables to make them spike up in price. So now that these are more like 70k up to 100k, doesn't really make it worthwhile to use the P90 with this barter, unfortunately. You can still go and edit this yourself, so instead of the ring sight, you can change this to the P90 top rail. This comes from Mechanic 2. Alternatively, you can change the entire upper over to this one, the humorously named FN90, and you can put that on, and this gives you this small little rail here to add some kind of holographic. You can't really put any long-range sights on this. There's a couple of exceptions like the L can, but most things like ring mounts don't fit on here because it's too short. So typically you're going to want to put on something like an EOTech holographic or whatever, and this makes it nice and short and you don't have any height over bore problems. Outside of the barrel choice, not really much else that you want to do with this gun. You can technically improve the charging handle by +1 ergo there, and you can change the butt pad over to remove 1 recoil here, but it's neither here nor there really. And the only other thing to kind of note is that if you're using the short barrel, you can suppress this to get slightly better recoil, but if you're using the long barrel, then this actually can't take a suppressor at all, so you're stuck being loud if you're using this long version with the fast muzzle velocity. I've just swapped over to a short-range suppressed build that I've been using recently, which has SS190 loaded into the magazine, as you can see here. This is SS190, and when it's loaded into the gun itself like this, you can see what that's going to actually do to the muzzle velocity up here. So this is 739 meters per second, which is pretty good. However, there are downsides to these SMG bullets. This one's not too bad because it is quite aeronautically sound. But as we'll see, there's a recurring theme about how far these bullets actually reach, because the SMG cartridges typically have lower damage and lower penetration than their assault rifle counterparts, especially at the top end. Given this is the best bullet that you could get for the P90, let's go and see how this performs. So we're back on tarkovgunsmith.com/ballistic calculator, and this is where I go for all of my damage drop off and that kind of calculations if you're looking at how far things can go. And we've got to select our caliber up here. We're going to put 5.7 in there. And then we select our weapon. We have the P90 in here, and then we choose our barrel. Let's just look at the longest barrel for the moment. And this is what the default ammo is for the gun, but we're going to be using SS190, so we stick that in here, and then we generate our drop table. We can see what our initial speeds are and things like that. I'm going to generate this over 200 meters. So we start with a penetration of 37 and a damage of 49. After 50 meters, this has dropped to just over 35, and the damage has dropped to 46.7. Now the problem with this, and this is one of the reasons why reaching out over longer distances with 37 pen ammo is kind of tricky, is that this 35.3 drops us significantly below the 50% chance to get through a class 4 helmet. So if you're fighting somebody at 50 meters, which just for reference is the length of the shooting range, if they're around this distance, then you have a less than 50-50 chance of actually penetrating if you hit them in the helmet and they're wearing a ULAC, for example. Out to 100 meters, this is even worse, and if you're thinking of using this long barrel and sniping people with it, then it can be a little bit tricky. It's just something to bear in mind. You can see the speed drop off here. The damage and the penetration drops off in proportion with the speed, not 1-to-1, but it drops off in proportion. So the faster the drop off, the faster the pen and damage will drop off too. This will become much more important later for some other ammos. This one's actually not that bad, but some of the others are a little bit more notable. Next up, we're going to look at the MPX. This is one of my favorite weapons because it has a really nice sweet spot combination of different properties to it. The first one being 850 RPM, which is actually slightly on the slower end for our SMGs, but it means that the gun is very controllable while still being fast enough to hit the headshots that we need with the ammo available. The magazines are super important for SMGs because of the high RPM, and so on this one we get both the access to the 41 rounders and also the 50s, which is a really nice choice because if you want to get that extra 11 ergonomics, you can move over to the 41 round magazine and only sacrifice 9 rounds for the sake of ADS speed or whatever it is that you might be trying to build for. This works really nicely on the MPX because you can build it however you like. There are tons of different barrels available and lots of different builds that you can do for this, and it's very modular because it's a SIG weapon, so it takes lots of these combinations of stocks that you might want to use, and it can be modded both for budget, and you could also go crazy on it and make it really expensive if you want to. Probably unnecessary, but you can do that. You can just go and buy one straight off the flea market, and some of these are pretty good value. Sometimes they come from raiders and rogues and those kind of places, and we can see there's a suppressed version here, and this is one of my favorite weapons actually within 9mm, this suppressed version of the MPX, and you can buy this from the trader. There's lots of different builds that are available from the trader too, and we've got the standard one, as we said, which is tradable for dog tags or directly for cash, so this is about 45,000 rubles worth. There's one on ref here, which I wouldn't really recommend, and then we've got this suppressed one. This is basically the MP5 SD equivalent in the MPX. This is like the MPX SD. And then we've got 2 more here. One which is the real long boy, which has got the 14-inch barrel on it, which is the fastest and most accurate for an SMG. And then also one from Mechanic, which is really just a source for the shift grip if you need it for gunsmith. But if you really fancy it, it's here. I think that this one is genuinely really decent value, and I'll show you why. It's also got extremely low vertical recoil of 32, and the ergo is pretty good already for being suppressed because it comes with this integrated suppressor, this MPX SD barrel. Now I'm going to show you a little trick here. So this is $425, and typically if you're looking through the flea market, other than this one that we just saw a moment ago, you normally don't find the suppressed ones here. They're usually base models. I reckon these are probably going to get snapped up relatively soon because they're 100% and they've got the suppressor already on it. But to convert to these costs about 16k, and these things are 40k on the flea market usually, and the version from Peacekeeper is quite expensive, $425, which roughly works out to about 65,000 rubles. There's a trick with dollars you can do though, and I'm going to show you this right now. So if we go and look at what the Peacekeeper rate actually is in game at the moment, because that's what some people use, there is the trick that people know about buying info items off the flea market and selling them back to him, because typically that gets you a better FX rate than 152. But there's another way here, and my favorite way to do it is with moonshine. So I actually have one in my stash, but I'll show you how we do this now. So this one is actually pretty cheap. This is 314,444. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the moonshine that we've just purchased, and we're going to relist it back up onto the flea market. I'm just going to do one of them so that we can see. Now, what this does here, the new interface shows you rubles, dollars, and euros. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter in a dollar amount. That's roughly equivalent to where the prevailing price is here. I think that's going to be about 2,500. So here, this shows you the estimate of what the price is going to be in rubles. And what the most important part about this is that this shows you actually where it gets listed on the flea market. So if we refresh this, we can see that, again, there's still the prevailing prices around here. These will disappear, and these will be where it's going to sell. So all we have to do is use trial and error to tweak this down so that it just fits that's inside the flea market offer. So this is 324, that's probably a little low, so we go 328, 390, there we go, we've got 329, 820. So what's going to happen is this is going to fit in right here, and you can see somebody else using this trick actually, so they're going to be slightly above us. But before we list it, I want to work out what this is actually going to be. So we bought ours pretty cheap, 314.444, and we're going to divide that by 2390, and this gets us to an exchange rate of 131. So versus 151, this is a huge discount. This is about 13% off, and this makes a big difference, right? This is slowly making you richer in monetary terms. I mean, people always ask me on the stream why I have so much money, and things like this are the reason why, you know. Otherwise, you're just paying over the odds. You're getting a 13% discount now for all of your stuff in dollars. So we're going to list that up there, and eventually this will sell. And when it does, we'll get $2,390 at a much cheaper price than using Peacekeeper. So as long as you do this in advance, then you can make sure that you keep, you know, enough dollars in here so you're not going to run out. Because if you do run out, then you probably have to buy them from Peacekeeper straight away, because this doesn't sell immediately. But using a 131 ruble exchange rate instead makes this much more appealing. If we go back to Peacekeeper and have a look at his offerings, we said that was 425, and at 131, this makes it 55k, which is pretty good. As we saw, you could get them a bit cheap off the flea market, so, you know, if they're appearing here, then you may as well just buy these, because this is good value, but just a trick for you if you want to try and make it a little bit cheaper. Now, one build that is really interesting here is this one, the long version, and I know a lot of people do quite like the long versions of the MPX because the recoil is really low and the MOA is quite low, and it also increases the muzzle velocity to as fast as it can be, because 9mm is quite a slow bullet anyway. But I'm going to show you here why sometimes this could be a mistake, and we're going to have to talk about the ammo before we get into this next piece of the conversation, so let's link search this. Fortunately, the best ammo that you can get for 9mm is PvP and is on the flea. This is very expensive and is on Prepper 4, but you can buy it. It's not actually that much more on the flea market, probably by virtue of the fact that it is so expensive on the trader. There's a decent limit of 180, so you can buy quite a lot of it, but yeah, this is not cheap at all. It's like 222k to buy the full limit. And this ammo was nerfed this wipe, which is not really great. It means that it now only has 44 damage. This was about 20% off what it used to be, 52. It used to be the same damage as AP 6.3, which is the next one down, but it did retain its penetration of 39. So this does allow it to defeat class 4 armor, but there's an important part about this, which is that the bullet velocity is super high, but the ballistic profile of 9mm in particular, which is quite a stark difference to SS190 for the P90, for example, is that these things are just not very aerodynamic. We're going to swap back over to Tarkov Gunsmith, and I've already filled this out for us. We've got the 9x19 MPX with the 14-inch barrel and PBP. And what this does is this puts our initial speed to 582.4 meters per second. Now, with the terrible ballistic properties of this gun, this takes PvP from 39 penetration and 44 damage, which is still respectable, over 50 meters, which, as I said before, is the end of the shooting range, to 31 pen and 35 damage, which is already struggling with class 4 armor seriously now, and with really, really low damage as well. So you just have to be super careful. Using 9mm is really tricky over longer ranges, so having the MPX, I don't know whether it's really that worth it. Like, you're not even going to be able to one-tap an unprotected head over about 50 meters. And the story just gets even worse as you go out to 100 meters, you know, 29 pen and 32 damage. I mean, this just really, really sucks. So you have to be super careful. And one of the reasons why this is so bad, it's mostly the ammo. It's also partly because of the way that we've set up this weapon. Tarkov's penetration and damage, as we said, falls off in proportion with the speed drop, and because the speed drop is so extreme because the ballistic profile is so terrible, this means the pen and damage drops off really fast as well, which is not really what you'd think about for a long barrel. If instead we use one of the shortest barrels available, which is the other build, the one that we were just looking at, the MPX SD, this is a 165mm barrel with a massive negative velocity modifier of -16%. This makes the initial speed 468.7 meters per second instead, and this means at 50 meters our penetration still not great, but it's 32.5 versus 36.7. If we just go back and compare, we've got one extra pen, and we've actually got 1.7 more damage for using the shorter barrel over a longer distance. Now, this shouldn't be the way it works, but it just is in Tarkov. The problem here, and I've talked about this previously over many years, ever since patch 12.12 was introduced, because the starting pen and damage of the gun is tied to the starting velocity of that particular weapon. A weapon with mods that fires a particular bullet faster for the same bullet will have more pen and damage drop off than that for a slower firing weapon, simply because they're all tied together. What should really happen is the pen and damage should be proportionally scaled based upon the speed of the weapon. So you should actually get more damage for an MPX with a 14-inch barrel than you do for one with a shorter barrel, which should have less damage and pen to start with. But because it's the same, irrespective of which one you begin with, you actually end up worse off at distance with the longer barrel, which is completely counterintuitive and shouldn't exist in the game, but it's just the way it works. This concept is going to be very important later, but we'll come back to it in a bit. Another thing that we have to mention is that, as per my previous testing, this also won't go through a class 4 helmet and kill them, even if it penetrates the helmet with 39 pen, which it should. If you're at point blank, it doesn't do enough damage to deal 35 through a helmet because of the way damage reduction works. So you do have to be careful with 9mm, and you just have to make sure that you are using it at very, very close ranges if you do want to do it. So on that basis, my favorite build is the SD version, this one, and you don't have to go crazy with it. You basically just want to change the ergo a little bit so that it's higher, so that you can use some of the larger magazines, either the 41 or the 50 if you decide to do so. You can do this by adding one of the handguards. You do have to be a little careful about the Midwest 4.5 because you can't attach a foregrip to it because it's too short. So we're going to add this one, and onto that we can add the AFG M-Lock. I've talked previously in other videos about why this is one of the best grips, so we're going to use that. And then from here, it's really up to you how hard you go. If you do have access to it and you just want to put on the growl, then you can do. And also you can take it down the regular route of the ARE combined with, say, a Daniel's Defense combination, DDECB, plus the ergo butt pad, and that will get you to 68 ergonomics and 32 vertical recoil. And this thing is going to be very, very snappy. Alternatively, you could just go for this, the CQB stock. This is one better ergo and loses one recoil, which really is neither by the by, so that's probably easier to do if you want to. Or alternatively, you could put on the SIG folding knuckle stock adapter and use this, the Viper PDW. This still keeps 34 vertical recoil because the gun's got such low recoil anyway, but this has the most ergonomics out of any stock in the game and ends up with 73, which is absolutely bonkers. And then you just use whatever sight you like. So it doesn't really matter how you mod this thing if you're using this particular configuration, and then you just commit to just playing it short range. I've had great success with this, and I don't think that the longer versions are really worth it, especially around barrel stuffing and other considerations about playing in CQB, given how the ammo wants to be used. So next up, we are looking at the Vector. This one is 950 RPM, so this is the fastest gun that we've looked at so far. And the 9mm Vector is kind of notorious in Tarkov because this was the weapon that pretty much broke the balance of 9mm. It was too powerful to be used in this particular gun, but then 9mm was too weak to be used in any other. So the Vector ended up just being absolutely everywhere. And the reason for this is because it could take a drum mag, which at 950 RPM is incredibly scary. You can buy the Vector on the flea market. This wasn't always the case, but you can now get this on the flea again, so you can buy both versions. We'll talk about the other one in a little bit. But this version you can get for about 80k. It's quite an expensive unlock from the trader. You have to do one of his more annoying tasks bullshit to get access to it, but you can buy these for about 80k, which is not too bad, especially considering that you don't really need to do anything to this weapon. There are two barrels available, the 6-inch and the 5-inch, but it doesn't really make any difference what you do. You can just put on a vertical foregrip. Again, like usual, the recoil on this is so low that it doesn't matter what you do in terms of the vertical recoil reduction, so you could just add on a Cobra or something to add the ergo, and you really don't need to change this stock. If you do want to spend money on it to make it the best that it can be, you can basically get 7 ergonomics by going for the Daniel's Defense stock. So we've got 65 and 36 if you go Vector NFA, and then you put on the advanced tube. Then you put on a Daniel's Defense ECB, and then you put on the ergo butt pad. This gets you no recoil whatsoever, but it gets you 7 ergonomics. So you can do that if you really want. I don't think it's totally necessary, but if you're running the 50s, then it might be, and with the suppressor. You can choose to go loud or quiet with this gun. There's a handful of different options for suppressors. Again, it doesn't really matter what you do because the stats are kind of the same on all of them. The one that I would typically choose is the SRD9, and the most important reason for this is that this gun loves to eat durability when it's suppressed. And you can see the difference between the Osprey, which is 65% durability burn, and this one, which is 50%. You actually save the gun a bit by going for the SRD9. This is the same as this one, which is 65, the rotor version, and then even the Gemtech 1, which is a suppressor that I personally really hate, is 60. So it's kind of the second best, even though it's very close to the others. So this one is better, the 6 hour, so you should use that one to make this 9mm Vector a little bit better. But even still, it does love to eat durability, and this weapon has a very similar problem that the MPX does in terms of the ammo, because it's still 9mm, so you may want to consider just going loud instead to save your durability, and also they're going to hear you anyway because you're going to be within 100 meters when you're shooting somebody with this thing. Let's swap back to Tarkov Gunsmith again, to the ballistic calculator. This time we have a Vector with the 5-inch barrel with PvP. And you can see this is actually even higher than with the MPX, even with the longest barrel at 622 meters per second somehow. I don't know, maybe that's a mistake, but we kind of know the ramifications of this at this point. This actually makes the 50 meter performance even worse with the Vector than it was on the MPX, with 30.8 pen versus 31 and 34.7 damage versus 35. And this was against the long barrel. So against the short MPX that we looked at, 32.5 goes down to 30.8 and 36.7 damage goes down to 34.7. So you're losing even more with the Vector, and you're basically counting on the fact that this 950 RPM can work for you in order to get your kills. As I said as well, this gun loves to eat durability, and you can see here if you're using, even with the best suppressor that we mentioned before, with the SRD9, against the MPX suppressed, Vector ends up with 95.5 durability versus the MPX with 96.5, which doesn't seem that much different, but it is 22% more damage that the gun is going to take. So over a couple of raids, you're going to very quickly go down below 90 and have to buy another one. And given these are quite expensive, this ends up being quite a lot of churn for the Vector. If you're using another suppressor, this is actually going to be even worse. If you unsuppress the Vector, then when you fire a full drum mag, then it's going to be down to 97 durability. So it's about a 2 times improvement on durability if you're loud, which I kind of think is okay. One other thing to mention, that the 9mm Vector is probably one of the better leg weapons because of the fact that it has a large drum magazine and it has rip ammo in it. It isn't as accurate as the MPX when you're firing a full spray, and I can show you an example of this here. Although the recoils are very, very similar, it's not the same on every gun. The recoil pattern is different, the RPM is different, so they're not really comparable. So you have to look at the spray pattern in the firing range, and the Vector does have more side-to-side horizontal. So if you're trying to hit heads specifically, I actually do prefer the MPX for that control, but it's up to you. Maybe you want the RPM. Ultimately, it all comes down to personal preference. Our second to last weapon that we're going to look at is the MP7. With its 950 RPM fire rate, this actually is the same as the 9mm Vector, but we do take a small downside here of only having 40 round magazines, which is pretty adequate, but it's not quite as good as the 50s for the other weapons. That said though, this doesn't put people off. This is probably one of the best SMGs in the entire game right now, arguably, and there are two versions of the MP7 that you can go for. There is the MP7A2 and the A1. Now, the only difference between these two guns is whether you want to add an extra foregrip or not. They're basically the same weapon otherwise. You can see the starting stats are exactly the same, 69 ergo on both, 42 vertical recoil on both. So this makes the A2 strictly better than the A1 because it has this extra attachment slot underneath that allows you to add a foregrip and add on however much ergo and a little bit of recoil that you want to over the top of the A1 version, which is the reason for the price difference. As you can see, these are both very expensive because they're one of the favorite SMGs, but there is an amazing barter for the A2, which is a GPX and a power bank. This thing is really, really cheap at the moment, 28k for the GPXs, and the power banks are currently trading at about 41k, so this is only 60k or something for a weapon that's currently over 100,000 rubles for the gun. So if you can do that one, then that is really, really good to do. The A1 is not bad either if you're on a budget or struggling, but if you can get the A2, then I would recommend you do so. As we said, the 40 rounders are very good. These are quite high level, but they are available on the flea market now because of flea market flipping, so at least take one of these in the gun if nothing else. And the ammo itself is also on the flea market. The MP7 FMJ round is one of the few that has managed to survive various rounds of nerfs and restrictions and limits or whatever. It's still available on traders, it's still available on the flea because it just sneaks in there with its 40 pen, which is one of the better routine rounds for an SMG. This does unfortunately suffer from the same experience as the others like PvP and SS190 because you won't be able to one-shot a PMC if you hit them in the helmet and they're wearing class 4, even though you're probably going to pen almost every time with this particular bullet. But with the 950 RPM and the fact that it does have a higher pen, this allows it to deal with armor a bit better despite its lower damage. Now, this is expensive on the flea market because, as I said, it's quite in vogue at the moment, but you can get it on mechanic. You have to complete the quest import to do so, but once you have that, then you can get it fairly cheaply. In terms of the gun itself, this is really easy to mod. You just stick on any old foregrip. I'd probably just add on the Cobra or something because that's got high ergo. And then you just decide, do I want to go suppressed or not? And pop this guy on. This gets it down to 38 vertical recoil, which is a little bit higher than the Vector and the MPX, but probably a little bit better than the P90. And then you just choose a sight. That's really it. The gun is very, very easy to make. So this is the version that I've been running. I've been adding both the Chris Defiance front and back, and then adding my usual WMX 200 on the side with the delta point, and it sings. This gun is very, very nice. And incidentally, because the FMJ bullet, the 4.6 round for HK, is actually quite aerodynamic, it ends up having nice ballistic properties too. Back to Tarkov Gunsmith we go. We start with 40 pen and 43 damage. This goes down to 38 penetration at 50 meters with 41 damage, which is still very respectable. We were above the 50% threshold of penning a class 4 helmet. Admittedly, it won't one-shot them, but you will still deal that damage, and that is useful sometimes to be able to go and deal the damage that you need to. You'll probably hit for about 30. If you shoot somebody subsequently in the arm, for example, you can end up blacking out their head because the damage gets distributed across the body, and you can kill them much faster than you think because now their head is much lower HP than the rest of their body. So spraying with the MP7 at distance is much better than with 9mm, so this is actually a little bit more of a generalist gun. And there is one more bullet for this weapon, which is very unusual. This is the best armor piercing SMG round in the game, with 35 damage, which admittedly is very, very low, but as we said, it wasn't hitting headshots anyway through class 4, so it doesn't really matter. But with a pen of 53, this is very similar to M995. Now, this is only fine in raid until you do some really high-end quests, so it's quite annoying to do, and then you have to craft it in Workbench 3, so it's not really that accessible, but you can find APSX around in the world. You know, I've got a decent amount of it, and if you are playing against geared players, at least gives you that option to cleanly pen through class 5 and have a chance against class 6 to be able to take it down in a few less hits than it would do with FMJ. If you're using FMJ, it really is a headshot only style of weapon, but with the RPM and all the other stuff we've talked about, it is actually quite plausible. And so finally, we come on to number 1, which I think is the best SMG in Tarkov, which is the 45 Vector. I am personally quite surprised that I've ended up putting this here, but after testing it out, this thing has absolutely sung in the raids that I've had. The biggest downside to the 45 Vector that we need to talk about straight away is the 30 round mags. This is the biggest mag that you can get for the gun. And the fact that this thing has a 1100 RPM, which is the second highest fire rate in the entirety of the game, and second only to the Glock 18C pistol, by the way, which is more of a meme. These bullets disappear incredibly quickly, and it does make it a little bit harder to fight against squads. But the time to kill on this thing is so dramatically short. Combined with the ammo, this makes it insanely good. And looking at the ammo stats, you'll see why I think this. So let's go and look at the ammo. You're also able to get this on the flea market as well, which is 45 ACP AP, which is a nasty bullet. This is 66 damage and 38 penetration, which is very good. 66 damage is insanely high for an SMG ammo. And you can probably see the trade-off here in the stats already, which is the 299 meters per second bullet velocity. However, this does have some upsides. On the flea market here, we can get this for about 900 rubles, so it is quite expensive. If you're buying it from Peacekeeper 4, it's $5.34, so this ends up probably being about 800, so it's not actually that much more expensive on the flea. And when we load it into the Vector, this takes it into 330 meters per second, which is not very fast. But let's just hop back into Tarkov Gunsmith again to have a look at what the stats are on this thing. So starting at 38 penetration, which is around the 50-50 mark for penetrating class 4, and then you've got 66 damage. Now, as you go through, you may notice here that the damage and pen just doesn't really drop off. It goes down to 37 at 50 meters, and the damage is still 64 at 100 meters. You're still hitting 36 penetration and 62.5 damage. This is absolutely insane, and this makes the gun really good at range, oddly, despite the fact that you wouldn't think so. In terms of its drop, if you're just calibrated to 50 meters, then over 100 meters, then it's going to be about 30 centimeters low, so you will have to calibrate for that. At 50 meters, it's going to be just a little shy, 2 centimeters below, so that's fine. And it's basically flat between 0 and 50, so this is actually fine to use at relatively close ranges. And if someone is a decent distance away, you could just kind of pepper them and aim up a little bit. Incidentally, because of the damage of this bullet, this will one-shot through a helmet if it pens. And because we're on the 50-50 threshold, you actually just have a 50% chance of killing them straight up if you hit them in the ULAG. And that continues out to about 100 meters, which is quite unusual. Obviously, you do have to contest with the fact that the 330 meters per second bullet velocity is very slow. So if someone is running left to right and they're over a decent distance, you have to lead the target by quite a significant amount in order to actually hit them, because they're just going to be running away from the bullets. They're not going to get there fast enough. But in my experience of using this gun so far, it has been absolutely insane. So this mod's out exactly the same as the 9mm Vector. You just put on whatever you want in terms of a vertical foregrip. The stock is the same as well. You can either go for the folding adapter to get this extra 7 ergo if you go for the Daniels Defense. And there is one option of a suppressor. I typically don't bother suppressing this thing, but you can if you want. It's up to you. You have to use the Omega 45K. You get this massive durability burns. You kind of suffer from the same problems, whereas with the muzzle brake, you don't get that at all. So it's a lot more sensible to fight multiple people, and I think that that's probably better for the RPM that we're talking about. It is much cheaper than its 9mm counterparts, so this is only about 50k, and there are less places to buy it. There's just Skier at 90k, and there's one on Ref as well, which has this nice sight on it. If you did want to go that route with the GP coins, but normally you could just buy them off the flea market for even under half the price for the 9mm Vector, because people are really put off by this 30 round mag, but so far for me it's been working out just fine. And I will note that it does have a higher vertical recoil than the 9mm Vector, but you can spray people much more readily and kill them because of the higher damage of this gun overall. There also comes a point where we just don't really care about lower recoil. At some stage it's easy to hit people, and anything beyond that is almost overkill. Not to mention the fact that you should utilize crouching when you can, because it removes about a third of the recoil from the weapon. So if you're crouching with this and firing over range, you can easily kill people at 50 to 70 meters, and I've definitely done so with holographics and red dots as well in the recent raids. So as I said, I can't sing the praises of the 45 Vector enough. I've been using a selection of SMGs over the last week, and this one has been the standout performer despite the 30 round mags, which for me was kind of a deal breaker previously, but I thought let's just give it a go. And normally when I'm using the 45 Vector, it's typically because I'm running leg meta. We should mention that it is probably the best leg meta gun in the entire game. 45 RIP has an insane damage on it, and it's one of the only guns that is 5 hits to kill on the legs. This is also extremely unusual for an SMG. You normally have to move up to something like the Ash 12 with a really slow fire rate and really high recoil to get anywhere near that, and so you actually have a lot of choice with this thing. And although I'm experienced with using this with RIP, when I tried it with AP, which is something I don't normally do, I was blown away by how good this gun was. So this takes the crown for me, the 45 Vector. I think this is the standout SMG of the patch, and I hope that you'll have as good a time as I did with it as well. So next up, let's take a look at a few clips of this thing destroying in action. Yeah, you can voice your concern about it, but still run it until it's changed. Absolutely. Oh, it's crazy! You catch someone unawares with this bad boy, it's crazy. Was he looking for somebody? Who was he looking for? I'm actually not going to loot him straight away. How about that? Not looting straight away. What is this witchcraft? I know. Being pre-pained? Not looting immediately? Who and where was that? Likely the guy he was looking for? Maybe. Was drawn in by the fight? Because I'm loud, which is actually probably preferable for playing. Where would this person be going? Oh, they're this way. I actually need to drink this. Oh, how did I screw that up? I applaud your patience in tracking / waiting for the guy. I could never. The thing is, it's that or die. I mean, somebody's been through. Whether they're still here or not is another question. Damn, he got a good shot on me there. See if anyone comes. Sneaky, sneaky. Question working on? Working on assessment. Okay, well, there's another one. What I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to throw a nade to make me think I'm still here. And then I'm going to go round. I can't believe that killed him from that distance, actually. I was like, should I shoot? I wasn't sure. Okay, we have the high ground, Anakin. Now what? I've run out of nades now. Left flank. Kind of hard because they're like right behind the box. Got the rig and fill the ammo. I don't want to do that. It's a horrible glitch. Did I kill him? Oh, I did kill him. GG's. That was a good one if I do say so myself. Blue tape as well. Which I haven't found yet. Yo. He's in the house. Try and kill him. Oh. Got him. That was close. Oh no. Oh god. Where's this one? God damn, the scavs are vicious. Interesting. Can't tell where this guy is. That was a good kill. Okay, we're thinking, my friends. We're thinking. The thinking man's Tarkov. That was a got him. If there ever was one, that was a got him. GG's to that player. Good fight. I'm proud of that one. Yo, 69. Big boy. And it is on par. So the 45 vector is the same as the MP9N. Just I'm not sure if I killed him. I did kill that guy, yeah. Must be upstairs. I've got it on. I've got it on, not on full auto. That is unfortunate. Oh, weird. Why is there so much flashbang going on? Rip the Merin loot. The thing is, the Merin key is like 40k. It's extremely cheap. So it pays itself back basically by looting one silver badge or something. Okay. So there's a lot of fighting up here. We're just gonna have to be kind of careful. I'm gonna stay low and just... We're gonna like creep in and see what happens. I'm pretty low down here, and so I shouldn't be able to be snuck upon or like shot from distance. Well, there you go. Sometimes being cautious pays off. Now we're going to flank. Because whoever that was probably heard me shoot. So I'm actually going to go down and round. And back up. We've got to go away that they're not thinking where we're coming from. I kind of figured, right, we're going to have to be the ones creeping in so that no one hears us. Oh, there's loads of them. There was a guy here. I'm stuck on something. Ah, it's a freaking wheelbarrow. Are they fighting each other? I can't believe that didn't kill him through the fence. I guess the fence is the ultimate anti-SMG protection, but whatever. Is it an SVD? I think it was like an SR, I think. Fence is a tier 7 armor, yeah. Got one. I could actually see him through the slats before I popped my head up. No way. How did you know I was there? I saw you, but I think I fired at you before, and I looked through the fence. I was just explaining to chat here. Through the fence, you can kind of see, and I could see you through here. A Zoetrope, yeah, a bit like one of those. And I could kind of see you, and so then I stood up and shot you over the top of the fence line. So as usual, big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.